Well, Mike, you're throughout your career, you're regularly meeting with the psychopaths, these
Yeah.
guys who have multiple bodies, who are extremely violent. At any point, did you feel like your life was in danger? Did you
No.
feel like there's a hit on you where, you tell this guy the wrong thing, he's just going to pull out a gun, shoot you in the head, get rid of the body, and deal with the consequences later on?
One, I'm a better shot than them. Two, I have a funny story because, again, on Mulberry Street, when I was trying to get the probable cause for the putting in a social club, I would, from a distance, do my surveillance. And then I get closer and closer. And I decided to park a van in front of the club to see if I can get any overhears. And I had two detectives that I cite in the book that I worked with, Patty Maggiore and Joe Simone. Very good. And I remember them asking me, aren't you concerned somebody's going to come out and put a lock on the back of the van and throw a Molotov cocktail into the van? And I said, no, not really. And they said, well, what would you do? I said, well, one, if I see a guy come out with a rag and a bottle, as soon as I see the lighter come out, I'm shooting him in the head. They burst out laughing and say, you could do that? I joke, yeah, you can. If my life or another person's life is in jeopardy, we're authorized to basically prevent it with, using our weapon. But these bank robbers eventually came out and leaned against the van to discuss bank robbery. Literally, I could have hit him in the head if there was no wall to the van. And they discussed, we need a van like this. We pull up on the armored car. I've been in shootouts before. We always have an insider. And that evidence helped facilitate the wire in the club. But a few weeks later, observed the group looking to do a bank robbery of a bank where Robert De Niro lived on the top 3 floors of the bank, supposedly, in a penthouse. And fascinating, overhears and, that type of detail. But from a threat standpoint, no, I'm pretty much, I have faith in my life. I think the reason I obtained a job as an FBI agent was a divine intervention because I had a wild, childhood. I sort of liked doing everything on dares. And I never feared, to me, there was one wise guy that I thought was treacherous. I knew he hated law enforcement and I knew he manufactured silencers, but I couldn't use the information to raid it because it was singular. He lived close by. He looked like a caveman. If I saw him on my property, I would have shot him immediately after letting the Akita attack.
And can I add, the Mafia is a very regimented organization as well. It's not that you can just, as a mobster, say, I don't like Mike Campi, I'll take him into the woods and shoot him, or any other. They did kill a DA agent in the mid-'80s, Everett Hatcher, who was undercover. And the law enforcement response was so powerful and so overwhelming that the Mafia themselves found the guy who killed the agent, and the Mafia killed the guy who killed the agent and left his body on the street to send the message to law enforcement. We know that there are lines that we can't cross and that we don't cross, because otherwise it's all-out warfare. If you start killing FBI agents, it's all-out war.
Now, Everett Hatcher, I did undercover work for. He was a real gentleman, okay? And so what had happened, he was doing undercover into Faraci. And from the beginning, Faraci was going to rip him off. And he shows up with the money and Faraci kills him, okay? So now we know it's Faraci and we can't find him. So on an early Sunday morning, the head of DEA in New York goes to Gotti's house, knocks on the door. And he says, not one of your people are going to move. I'm going to have an agent walking side by side of all your people if you don't give up Gus Faraci, So Gotti must have figured that if he gives up Faraci, Faraci's liable to flip. So Gotti's people killed Faraci.
Counterproductive. Yeah. And a historic example of it is Dutch Schultz. Dutch Schultz was killed because he wanted to kill the prosecutor, Thomas Dewey. And the wise guys realized this isn't good, and because he then discussed it with Albert Anastasia, and Anastasia shared it, he's not listening, they killed him in Newark. You know,
And if I could just say, we talk about all of this, we're dumping a
And
lot
more.
on you, but we get deep into detail on all of this that we've talked to you about in our book, War Against the Mafia. It's very thorough.
Well, yeah, because in 1985, Enrique Quique Camarena, who was a DEA agent in Mexico, was, and I interviewed the DEA agents who actually investigated this whole situation because he had essentially given information for this huge marijuana field to be destroyed. The cartel kidnapped him and tortured him for days, to the point where they actually had a doctor there that when he was about to die, they would pump him full of adrenaline, bring him back to life, and then torture him further. And you guys know about this case, right?
yeah. Yeah, I worked with some good
to the
DA.
point where, like, his picture's on every DEA agent's office all across the world. And I mean, the pushback was so hard on this that I believe Ronald Reagan closed the U.S.-Mexican border until his body was found. But this type of thing does happen. I mean, you push the wrong psychopath a little too far, and they don't really care about the repercussions at that point.
But it also facilitates cooperation from that side in narcotics, whether it's Colombians, Russians, Asians. You start threatening people, the families, basically realize what are their choices. We got to get out of here. And can't save everybody if they start talking about killing people back at home. But the reality is it's stupid. That type of, because it ends badly for not only the head of the organization, but so many in the organization to realize, the treachery of it.
Yeah, and what you referenced happened in Mexico. So it's a continuum, right? The more lawless a society becomes, the more of a risk what you mentioned takes place. So we as a society of law-abiding people have to take a very strong stance to protect the lives of the people who protect and serve the rest of us, people who are like the agents like Mike, because otherwise you start to go down that slope and then you have total chaos, total corruption. Nobody has quality of life.